Jack had been flying cargo ships for years, but this job felt different. The client had paid extra to deliver the goods personally to a remote moon in the Calera system. The place was not on any trade map, and the coordinates came with a warning. Do not enter the Central Valley after dark. He thought it was strange, but he needed the money. So he didn't ask questions. The moon's surface was silent, covered in silver frost that sparkled under the twin suns. His ship landed near a cluster of tall, crystal-like trees, their branches moving in the cold wind. He grabbed the cargo crate and started walking toward a faint light in the distance. The air was thin and bitter, and his breath came out in small clouds. The light grew brighter as he approached, and soon he heard voices strange. Melodic sounds mixed with deep, rumbling tones. Jack crouched behind a ridge, curious. Below, in a wide clearing, a group of tall aliens stood in a circle around a glowing blue fire. They wore robes of woven silver and black, their heads crowned with thin golden bands. In the center stood a young alien woman, her skin shimmering like polished metal under the firelight. She had long white hair braided with threads of gold, and her eyes glowed faintly purple. Jack didn't understand the language, but the atmosphere told him this was important, maybe some kind of royal ceremony. He knew he should leave, but something kept him watching. The woman raised her hands, and the fire changed color. Turning deep crimson, the crowd gasped, and several of the taller aliens knelt. Jack leaned forward to see better, and his boot slipped on the frost. A rock tumbled down the slope with a loud clatter. Every head in the clearing turned toward him. Jack froze. The young woman's eyes widened. But instead of calling for guards, she took a step forward, then another, until she was running toward him, her robe flowing behind her. She reached him in seconds, her hands grabbing his arm with surprising strength. Her voice trembled as she spoke in broken English. You? Human. You've seen too much before. Jack could respond. She added, almost in a whisper, marry me, or my brothers will kill you. Jack blinked, not sure if he had heard her right. Marry her? He didn't even know her name before he could ask. 3 massive figures broke from the circle and started toward them. They were at least 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and armor made from dark scales. Their glowing red eyes locked on Jack like a predator on prey. The girl tugged his arm urgently. Come now. No time. Jack didn't know what was going on, but he did know that staying meant trouble. He let her pull him away, running into the frost-covered forest. Behind them, the brothers shouted in their alien tongue, their voices shaking the air. Jack's boots crunched over ice and roots, his breath burning in his chest. The girl's robe snagged on a branch, and he helped tear it free. Who are you? He gasped. Lyra, she said quickly. And if you live, you'll be my husband by moon's end. The words made no sense, but the fear in her voice was real. They ran until the sound of pursuit grew louder. A strange roar echoed from behind, not human, not mechanical, but something alive and angry. Jack glanced over his shoulder and saw shapes moving through the trees. Fast and powerful, Lyra yanked him toward a narrow gap between 2 crystal trees. We hide here, she said, pulling him. Into the shadows, they crouched low as the brothers' footsteps thudded closer. Through the gaps in the crystal bark, Jack saw their huge forms pass by. One of them stopped, sniffing the air, then snarled and kept moving. Jack held his breath until the sounds faded into the distance. When he finally exhaled, his breath came out in a shaky cloud. Why are they after me? He whispered. Because you saw the binding flame, Lyra said, her voice low. It is forbidden for outsiders, and the punishment is death. Jack felt his stomach twist. Then why marry me? He asked. Law, she said simply. A husband cannot be harmed, not even by my family. She looked at him, her purple eyes filled with both fear and something else, desperation. "You are my only chance," she added, "if you refuse. They will kill you before dawn." The weight of her words hung heavy in the frozen air. Jack didn't know if she was telling the truth or using him for something else, but the sound of distant howls reminded him they didn't have time to argue. He nodded slowly, even though every instinct told him this was madness. Lyra gave a quick, relieved breath and took his hand. "Then we must go," she said. Before my brothers return, they slipped back into the forest, the icy wind cutting against their faces. Somewhere far behind, the blue fire still burned. In the clearing, but now it was joined by the sound of armored warriors preparing for a hunt. Jack didn't know where they were going, only that every step took him deeper into a world he didn't understand. And the deeper they went, the clearer it became. There was no turning back. Jack stayed still, his ears straining to catch any sound. The air in the underground chamber felt heavier now, as if something unseen had entered with them. Lyra didn't move either, her purple eyes scanning every shadow. The creak came again, longer this time, followed by a faint scraping on metal. He swallowed hard. "You said no one comes here." Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "No one living." The words sent a chill down Jack's spine. He tried to remind himself that ghost stories existed in every culture. But the sound didn't feel like imagination. A soft glow appeared from deeper in the wreck. Not the steady light of the plants, but a flickering, shifting glow. Jack rose slowly, careful not to make noise. Lyra moved beside him, her blade ready. They stepped closer, the floor beneath them groaning softly under their weight. The glow came from a narrow corridor in the ship's hull. Jack could see strange writing on the walls, faintly illuminated by the light. It looked like symbols burned into the metal long ago. The flicker grew brighter, and a shape appeared at the end of the corridor, tall, thin, and moving slowly toward them. Jack's first thought was that it was one of Lyra's brothers, but the figure's steps were too unsteady, too slow. Lyra tensed, her voice low and urgent. "Back away." The shape stepped into view, and Jack saw it clearly, a figure in ancient armor, its helmet dented and rusted. The plates of its armor glowed faintly from inside, as though lit by some dying fire. It stopped a few steps away, tilting its head toward Jack. The sound it made was like metal grinding against stone. Lyra stepped forward. Speaking rapidly in her own language, the armored figure didn't move for a moment, then slowly lowered the long spear it carried. The tip glowed faintly blue. Jack whispered, "Is it going to attack?" Lyra's grip on her blade tightened. "No. It's guarding." She looked at him sharply. "It knows you don't belong here." The figure raised its spear slightly, pointing toward a side corridor. Lyra nodded once. "It wants us to leave this hall. We should listen." They followed the direction it indicated, the armor's faint glow lighting their path until they were deep inside the wreck. The air here was warmer, and the walls were covered with more of the glowing plants. Jack's heart was still pounding. He glanced back, but the armored figure was gone. They entered a small chamber with curved walls and a ceiling that dripped slowly with melted ice. In the center was a round table carved from dark stone, covered in dust and strange carvings. Lyra ran her fingers over the markings, her face thoughtful. "This was a council room," she murmured, "before the war destroyed this place." Jack lowered himself onto a bench carved from the same stone. "So your people built this ship?" Lyra shook her head. "No, this is older than my people. My brothers fear it because they believe the last crew still walks here, bound to protect their ship forever." Jack didn't like the idea of armored guardians watching them in the dark, but he had to admit the wreck was the first place they'd found where her brothers hadn't already caught up. Lyra looked at him then, her expression more serious than before. "You asked me why marry you? I will tell you now." She sat beside him, her voice low. "The binding flame you saw, it is more than a ritual. It marks the next leader of my clan. Only those of pure blood may witness it. Anyone else is killed to keep the secret. But there is a law older than the flame. A law that says if the one who saw it becomes the spouse of the chosen, their life is protected. Jack understood. Now, so you're the chosen? She nodded. I was. Until I refused to marry the warlord chosen for me. My brothers see you as a threat. And as an insult, if you marry me, they can't kill you. But they will try to break you until you leave me. Jack leaned back, letting the weight of it sink in. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was walking straight into the center of her people's politics. Lyra's eyes searched his face. If you want to run, this is your chance. I can find another way. He thought about his options. There weren't many. Her brothers were hunting him. The warlord was somewhere out there, and he had no ship that could outrun them. He also thought about how she had dragged him away from certain death without hesitation. Jack gave a short nod. Then I guess I'm staying, before Lyra could respond. A loud crash echoed from the corridor they had come through. The table between them vibrated slightly. Jack jumped to his feet. Your brothers. Lyra shook her head. No. That's coming from below. The sound came again, louder, followed by a long, deep groan that seemed to travel through the metal walls. Dust fell from the ceiling. And the plants on the walls pulsed brighter for a moment. Lyra grabbed his arm. We need to move, now. They hurried toward another exit at the back of the chamber, Jack glancing over his shoulder every few steps. The glow from the plants began to dim, one by one, as though something in the wreck was swallowing their light from somewhere far. Below, a voice-like sound rose, not words, but a drawn-out, echoing wail that made the air feel colder. Jack didn't know what was down there. But he knew one thing. The wreck wasn't as empty as Lyra had claimed. The wail from below faded, but it left behind a heavy silence that pressed against Jack's ears. Lyra didn't slow, her bare feet barely making a sound on the smooth floor. Jack's boots scraped noisily, and he wished for once he could move like her. The tunnel twisted sharply, and the air grew warmer, almost humid. They entered a wide chamber filled with broken machinery. Some of it still sparked faintly, glowing with strange blue light. The walls were covered with vines from the glowing plants. Lyra stopped suddenly, crouching low. Jack followed her gaze and saw a movement near the far wall. At first, he thought it was another armored figure. But this one was smaller, moving faster. It darted between pieces of wreckage with quick, jerky motions. The glow from the plants flickered as it passed. Jack felt the hairs on his neck rise. Lyra whispered, "It's not alive." Not really. A watcher. The thing stopped and turned toward them. Its head was a smooth oval with no face. Just a thin line of light where eyes should have been. Jack's breath caught when the light shifted from pale blue to deep red. Lyra's eyes widened. It has seen us. The watcher moved suddenly, skittering along the wall like an insect. Lyra grabbed Jack's arm. We run. They took off toward another tunnel. The sound of metal claws scraping after them. Jack risked a glance back. The watcher was faster than it looked. Its limbs moved in unnatural ways, bending at angles. That made Jack's stomach twist. The tunnel narrowed, forcing them to run single file. Lyra led the way, her silver hair streaming behind her. The watcher's red light grew brighter, throwing long shadows ahead of them. Jack could hear its claws. Clicking closer and closer, they burst into another chamber. This one opened to the sky through a jagged hole in the ice above. Moonlight poured in, making the frost sparkle like crushed glass. Lyra didn't stop. She headed straight for the far side, where a broken section of the ship's wall formed a ramp upward. They scrambled up, slipping on the ice. The watcher followed, but the narrow ramp slowed it. Jack reached the top first and turned to offer his hand to Lyra. Just as she grabbed it, the watcher leaped. Its claws scraped across the metal at her feet, and she kicked hard, sending it sliding back down the ramp. But it didn't fall far. Instead, it latched onto the wall and began climbing again. Lyra's voice was tight. "It won't stop. Once it marks us, my brothers will know exactly where we are." Jack's heart thudded in his ears. "Then we destroy it." Lyra hesitated, then pulled a small crystal sphere from a pouch. The sphere glowed faintly green. "When it reaches us, break this." Jack nodded. The Watcher reached the top in seconds, moving with unnatural speed. Jack waited until it lunged, then slammed the sphere against the floor. There was a sharp flash of light and a sound like rushing wind. The Watcher froze mid-motion, its limbs twitching. Then it collapsed, the red light in its head fading to black. Lyra exhaled slowly. "It is blind now, but my brothers will still know we were here." Jack rubbed his hands together, trying to shake off the chill of adrenaline. "Then we keep moving." Lyra nodded, but her eyes were fixed on the sky through the hole above. They may already be on their way. They climbed out of the hole into the frozen night. The air was biting cold again, and Jack's breath came out in thick clouds in the distance. Faint lights moved across the ice, too high to be beasts, too steady to be torches. Lyra's voice dropped. "Skyriders, my brothers." There was no cover on the open ice. Lyra grabbed Jack's hand and ran toward a cluster of jagged crystal formations ahead. The wind howled around them, carrying the faint sound of voices. Jack glanced up and saw dark shapes circling against the moons. His stomach tightened. They reached the crystals and ducked into a narrow gap between them. The cold walls pressed close on both sides. Lyra's breath came fast. "If they see us, they will kill you before I can speak." Jack tried to keep his voice steady. Then, "Maybe now's the time for that ritual you keep talking about." Her eyes widened. "Here. Now." He nodded. "You said it's the only thing that will protect me. We don't have until morning." For a moment, she looked uncertain. Then the sound of wings beating overhead made the choice for her. She pulled him deeper into the crystal maze until they reached a small open space. The ice walls glowed faintly with trapped moonlight. Lyra knelt, drawing strange patterns in the frost with her fingertip. "Sit here," she ordered. Jack obeyed, watching as she took a silver ring from a chain around her neck. She pressed the ring into his palm, her hand lingering over his. "When I say your name, you must answer with mine." Jack nodded. The wind outside shifted, and faint shadows passed over the crystals. The voices were closer now. Lyra began to chant in her language, her voice low but urgent. The patterns in the frost began to glow faintly. Jack felt a strange warmth spreading from the ring in his hand up into his arm. She looked into his eyes. "Jack," she said firmly. "Lyra," he answered. The glow around them flared, and a deep, resonant hum filled the air. Outside, the sound of wings slowed, as if the brothers had sensed something they could not touch. Lyra's voice was barely a whisper now. "It is done." Jack's skin tingled, the warmth fading to a steady pulse in his chest. Lyra looked relieved, but her voice was grim. "You are my husband now. And that means the warlord will come for you too." The wind outside the crystal maze carried voices now, not distant but near. Jack could hear the scrape of boots on ice. Lyra's hand tightened on his wrist, her purple eyes fixed toward the narrow opening. A shadow passed across the glowing walls, then another. And then a deep voice spoke in her language, low and commanding. Lyra's breath caught. "My eldest brother," she whispered. Jack didn't need a translation to understand. The tone, it was the voice of someone used to being obeyed. Before Jack could speak, another voice joined in, harsher, angrier. The sound of weapons being drawn echoed through the maze. "They will not fight me here," Lyra said quickly. "The ritual is fresh. They will take us before the elders instead." Jack frowned. "That doesn't sound much better." Lyra's grip on his arm tightened again. It is. If you were clever, moments later, figures appeared at the mouth of the passage. Tall, broad, and wrapped in black armor. Their glowing red eyes locked on Jack immediately. The eldest brother stepped forward, his face hard and unreadable. He spoke quickly to Lyra, his tone sharp. She answered just as sharply, her voice steady. Jack caught his own name in the middle of her words. The brother's gaze shifted to Jack, and without warning, two warriors stepped forward and bound his wrists with a strip of silver cloth. It burned slightly against his skin, but Lyra didn't protest. Instead, she walked beside him, head held high as they were led out into the open night. The Sky Riders waited on the ice, sleek beasts with wings of dark glass and eyes like molten gold. The brothers mounted quickly, and one of them yanked Jack up behind him. The beast leaped into the air, the rush of wind freezing his face and numbing his fingers. Below, the wreck vanished into a swirl of frost and shadow. They flew for what felt like hours until lights appeared ahead, a vast city carved into the side of a frozen cliff rose before them, its towers glittering like diamonds in the moonlight. At its heart was a huge hall with golden doors taller than any human building Jack had ever seen. The beasts landed on a wide platform, and Jack was pushed toward the doors. Lyra walked ahead now, her posture unyielding. The hall inside was warm, lit by tall fires that burned with blue flames. Alien nobles filled the balconies above, their voices a low murmur as they stared at the human in their midst. At the far end sat the elders, 7 figures robed in white, their faces hidden behind masks of carved crystal. The eldest elder raised a hand, and the hall fell silent. He spoke in the cholera tongue, his voice slow and deep. Lyra stepped forward. Bowing her head briefly before speaking, Jack couldn't understand the words, but her tone was sharp, confident. The elders listened without moving. When she finished, one of them pointed at Jack. Lyra turned to him, her voice low. "They will ask you to explain why you saw the binding flame." Jack hesitated, then remembered her warning. They could still kill him here. When the question came, he stepped forward, feeling every noble's eyes on him. "I didn't mean to see it," he said slowly. "But your loss as a spouse of the chosen cannot be harmed. I am her husband." His voice carried in the silent hall. A ripple of murmurs spread through the balconies. The eldest elder leaned forward, speaking again. Lyra translated quietly. "They say the marriage is not valid without their blessing." Jack thought fast. "Then bless it now," he said loudly, "unless your laws mean nothing." The room went silent again. The elders sat still for a long moment, and then, one by one, they touched a small golden seal at their side. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. It was their sign of agreement. The eldest elder rose, raising both hands. His voice boomed across the hall, and the crowd erupted in a mix of shock and anger. The brothers stood rigid, their jaws tight, but they could not draw their weapons. Jack felt the burning cloth around his wrists loosen and fall away. Lyra stepped to his side, taking his hand in front of everyone. Her voice was steady but defiant. "He is my husband, and by your law, he is one of us." The elders dismissed the assembly, but as Jack and Lyra were escorted out, the eldest brother leaned close. His voice a low growl, his words were short. But the meaning in his glare was clear. This wasn't over, outside the hall. The cold air felt sharper than before, as they walked toward a smaller building at the edge of the platform. Lyra spoke without looking at him. "They will obey the law, but they will find other ways to break you." Jack gave a faint smile. "They can try, but deep inside." He knew she was right. The law might protect his life, but it couldn't protect him from everything else that was coming. From the shadows beyond the torches, a cloaked figure watched them go. The figure turned and vanished into the night, and somewhere far away. A warlord received the message the Chosen had married a human, and the game had just changed. The night over the frozen city was quiet, but Jack could feel the unease. In the air, even the wind seemed to move differently, whispering against the crystal towers. Lyra hadn't spoken much since they left the Elder Hall. She walked ahead with her head high. But her fingers were clenched tightly around the folds of her robe. They reached a guest chamber carved into the side of the cliff. A fire burned low in a silver basin, throwing shadows across the walls. Jack lowered himself onto a cushioned bench, finally feeling some warmth in his bones. "So," he said quietly, "we're married and alive. That's progress." Lyra didn't answer right away. She was listening, her head tilted slightly toward the window. Then she turned sharply, her voice low. "Someone's coming." Jack stood, instinctively reaching for a weapon he didn't have. Heavy boots struck the stone floor outside, followed by the sound of doors being pushed open. The guards didn't knock. They stepped aside, and a towering figure entered the room. The warlord Jack had never seen anyone like him. His armor was deep, crimson, polished to a shine that reflected the firelight. A black fur cloak hung over his shoulders, and a long blade rested casually in his hand. His eyes, pale gold, cold and watchful, moved first to Lyra, then to Jack. Lyra stepped in front of Jack without hesitation, speaking sharply in her own language. The warlord listened, his mouth curving into a faint smile. He replied slowly, almost lazily, as if enjoying the sound of his own voice. Jack didn't understand the words, but he didn't need to. The tone made his skin crawl. Lyra turned to him, her voice tight. "He says the Elder's blessing means nothing to him. He demands the right to challenge you. If you win, he leaves us. If you lose." Her pause was enough to finish the sentence. Jack exhaled. "Of course, it's a fight." The warlord gestured, and the guard stepped forward, pulling Jack toward the door. Lyra tried to follow, but one of the guards blocked her path. She shouted after Jack in her language, but the doors closed between them. They took him through winding corridors until they reached a large circular arena cut into the ice. Blue flames burned in tall stands around the edge, their light reflecting off the frozen walls. Nobles filled the seats above, their voices rising. In excited murmurs, the warlord stood in the center, his crimson armor glowing faintly against the frost. A guard shoved a short blade into Jack's hand. It was light but sharp. Jack tested the grip, his mind racing. He had fought before, but never against someone this big, this calm. The warlord's eyes stayed on him the entire time, as if studying where to strike. A loud horn sounded. The warlord moved first, crossing the ice in long, confident strides. Jack dodged the first swing, the blade slicing the air where his head had been. The second strike came faster, and Jack barely deflected. The impact jarring his arm, the crowd roared at every movement, their voices echoing off the ice. Jack realized quickly that he couldn't win by matching strength. The warlord was too powerful. Every time their blades met, the force pushed Jack back a step. He needed another way. He glanced around the arena, noticing a patch of frost that looked thinner, almost like wet ice. The warlord lunged again, and Jack let himself be driven toward that spot. At the last moment, he sidestepped, dragging his blade along the surface. The ice cracked under the warlord's weight, and his foot sank slightly. It was only a moment, but it was enough. Jack moved fast, ramming his shoulder into the warlord's side and sending him stumbling. The warlord caught himself, fury flashing in his golden eyes. He came at Jack harder now, his strikes faster, sharper. Jack felt one cut slice across his shoulder, the burn of cold mixing with pain. The crowd's cheers grew louder. Lyra appeared at the edge of the arena, her eyes wide. She shouted something to Jack, just one word. And pointed, Jack followed her gaze to the chains hanging from the upper wall. Their ends heavy with hooks. The warlord charged again. Jack ducked under the swing and ran toward the chains. Grabbing one and yanking it down, it swung in a wide arc, catching the warlord across the chest and knocking him backward. His blade clattered to the ice. Jack didn't hesitate. He pressed his own blade to the warlord's throat, breathing hard. The arena fell silent. The warlord stared at him, then slowly raised his empty hands. The elders, watching from above, gave a single nod. And the horn sounded again. Ending the fight, Jack stepped back. His chest heaving, the warlord rose, brushing frost from his armor. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then the warlord spoke in a low voice that even Jack could understand. "This is not over, human." The crowd erupted again, half in cheers, half in anger. Guards stepped between them, leading Jack toward the exit. Lyra was waiting there, relief flooding her face as she grabbed his hand. Her voice was fierce, but soft. "You survived. Now the real danger begins." The cold wind tore through the high cliff corridors as Jack and Lyra moved quickly away from the arena. Her hand was tight on his, almost pulling him. But her eyes kept scanning the shadows. The crowd's noise still echoed behind them, but ahead, the city seemed too quiet. "They won't wait," she said, her voice low. "The warlord will gather my brothers. They will come before the elders change their mind." Jack felt his pulse quicken. "Then where do we go?" Lyra's jaw tightened. "Not away. We go to the flame." Jack didn't like the sound of that, but he followed. They moved through narrow, frozen tunnels, passing guards who looked away quickly, as if they didn't want trouble. The path opened into a wide cavern deep inside the cliff. At its center burned the binding flame taller than a man, flickering in colors Jack had never seen before. The air was warm here, almost heavy. Lyra led him close to the fire, her voice urgent once more. "We speak our names. Here, the flame will mark us in a way no elder, no warlord, no brother can deny." Jack nodded. The warmth from the fire was strange, seeping into his chest and making his heart beat stronger. But before they could speak, voices filled the cavern. The warlord strode in, his crimson armor bright in the firelight. Behind him came Lyra's 3 brothers, weapons drawn. Their boots rang against the stone, the sound sharp and final. The eldest brother's gaze was fixed on Jack, his voice like ice. "End this. Human, walk away and you live." Jack stood his ground. "You know I can't." The warlord's smile was slow, dangerous. "Then you both die here." Lyra stepped in front of Jack, her voice cutting through the heat. "By law, you cannot touch my husband if the flame accepts him. Are you so afraid it will?" The warlord's eyes narrowed, but he didn't move. Jack stepped forward until he felt the heat of the binding flame on his skin. Lyra joined him, her voice steady. "Say it with me." The brothers began to advance, their armor glinting. Lyra spoke his name, Jack, and he answered, "Lyra." The flame roared higher, bathing them in shifting light. A sound like a deep bell echoed through the cavern. The colors of the fire swirled, then shot upward in a column that reached the ceiling. When it faded, faint glowing marks traced across Jack's forearms, the same that glowed on Lyra's skin. The brothers froze, the warlord's expression unreadable. The eldest took a slow step forward, but the flame flickered sharply toward him. The heat struck his armor with a hiss, and he stepped back. The warlord broke the silence, his voice low. "The flame has spoken." But he didn't leave. Instead, he pointed his blade at Jack. "The law binds me from killing you, but it does not bind me from breaking you. The galaxy is wide, human, and I will be waiting." He turned sharply and walked out, the brothers following in silence. When they were gone, Jack let out a slow breath. Lyra's shoulders relaxed, but her eyes were still sharp. They will not stop watching us, this marriage. It makes us enemies to powerful people. Jack gave a small smile. Then it's a good thing I'm stubborn. They stood together in the fire's glow, the marks on their arms pulsing faintly. Lyra reached for his hand, her grip firm. You are part of my people now, and I am part of yours. Above them, the cavern ceiling opened slightly to the night. Letting a cold breeze touch their faces, the binding flame's lights spilled upward into the dark sky, as if marking them for all to see, somewhere out there. The warlord's promise waited, and so did 100 other dangers neither of them could name. But for now, they walked out of the cavern side by side, their steps in perfect rhythm, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together.